This week is Rohatsu. This is the week that leads up to the Buddha's awakening, which we celebrate on December 8th. And it's an opportunity to talk about a particular moment. There are stories we need to tell ourselves over and over and over again. We need to hear them, and we also need to figure out what they sound like when they come out of our own mouths. I notice that every year I tell this story, and every year the story changes just a little bit, not in its particulars, but one year I notice this, and one year I notice this. We need to come back. Rohatsu is a pivotal week. There's a lot that happens before, right? There's a lifetime. If we go back 2,600 and however many years to this moment in, he wasn't the Buddha yet, in Siddhartha's life, he's in his mid-30s. He's living in a forest. And he has been training himself for 7 or 8 years to transcend his body. 8 years before he had this immediate experience, this shocking experience of sickness, old age, and death. And after that shock, immediately after, he encountered a man, an ascetic, someone who had dedicated himself to a spiritual path. And in the shock of that moment, Siddhartha decided, that's what I need to do. That is the way out of all of this. So he renounced all of it. He renounced his princely life. He renounced his wealth. He renounced his marriage. He renounced his child. And he disappeared. He found others who were on this same path, or their version of this path, and he studied with different teachers. He found the people who had pushed themselves the hardest, who had gone the furthest with their minds. He learned what they had to teach him. And because he was so driven, or maybe he had a talent, we're told that he excelled at this. He was good at this kind of practice. He was good at pushing himself to the very edge and then further. So by the time we reach this moment in his life, he's the person people are looking to. He's the model, the exemplum. In the forest with these other ascetics. And when we zoom in on him, we see his hair is long, it's filthy, it's matted. He hasn't bathed in years. He meditates on thorns in his own filth, naked. His fingernails are like this. And along the way, he has learned to control pain, to control discomfort. He can reduce his heart rate as a choice, slowing it down and down and down, taking himself to the edge of death, but not death. We're told that he was subsisting on a grain of rice a day, emaciated. always looking to find what would be on the other side. If he pushed himself hard enough, if he gave up enough, if he was sincere enough, would he transcend the suffering of this life? Not through death, but through some sort of willed transcendence. Would he rise above all of it? At this moment in the story, in what we call Rohatsu, he has pushed himself so hard that he's approaching death anyway. And so one day, at the very edge, in that place between being alive and letting go completely, he leaves his spot and he wanders off a bit. And a young girl finds him, and her name is Sujata. And we remember her name because without her, the story stops. And she offers him some rice and some milk. And so, for the first time in years, he allows himself to be nourished. He lets something in. And he discovers this incredible energy. He concludes right there on the spot, I wasn't doing it right. In trying to move away from this place of luxury and decadence and mindlessness, I went too far in the other direction, into a place of absolute control, where every breath was an act of control, every thought was an act of control, every gesture was an act of self-denial. When he took that bite of rice and he drank that milk, he said, there is something else. There is another way. I'm not done yet. So he went down to a river and he climbed in and he bathed. And he arranged his hair, he cut his nails. And along the way, one of the men who had been training with him, practicing with him in the forest, spotted him in this act of decadence and went back to the rest and said, we lost him. He was doing so well. But he's a traitor to this path. He has betrayed us. He is not the person we thought he was. He is not the person we hoped he would become. And they left him behind. Siddhartha, full of energy, with this feeling that there was a new start, went and he found a tree. He sat down beneath it. And he remembered this moment when he was a child, when he had sat in an orchard, not doing anything, not focusing on anything, but feeling totally present to where he was. And he thought, that may be the key. So rather than sit down beneath the tree and try to control his mind in this way or that way, rather than try to open this channel or shut down this channel, he just sat down and he began to breathe and to be where he was. And he resolved that if he could not truly awaken, he would not get up again. This was his moment. He was going to sit down and just not get up. So he sits beneath the tree, and day turns into night. And here, this is where I think the story gets really fun. There's something about what he's doing alone in a forest in India that is felt. Other beings start to feel that something is happening. Something that perhaps they weren't sure would ever happen. Creatures start to wake up to it. They start to watch. They start to listen. And one being who notices is Mara, the demon who exists in opposition to awakening. He thrives on delusion. He feels a disturbance in the world, and he knows the thing that he has feared most for his entire existence is in motion. And so he comes, he finds Siddhartha, and he taunts him. He distracts him. He says, hey, I know what you're trying to do, and you're not the one to do it. And Siddhartha is unmoved. Mara brings armies, and the armies fire arrows, thousands upon thousands of arrows at Siddhartha where he sat. And Siddhartha did not move. And we're told that the arrows turned into flowers just before they reached him. And so now he's sitting beneath these trees and he's surrounded by flowers. And he doesn't move. Mara summons his daughters and instructs them to seduce him. And they try, and he's unmoved. He has no other card to play. And so he realizes in the same moment that the whole world realizes. There's no stopping this. This is inevitable now. We're told that the birds stopped singing, that animals of the night froze where they were. The trees stopped rustling, the wind stopped blowing, the universe held its breath. The thing they didn't even know they needed was going to happen right now. And we're told the Buddha, from where he sat, he saw one morning star. And in that moment, he woke up completely. And the universe could breathe again. I've thought about this moment so many times. I've seen cartoons of it where Siddhartha goes from being an ordinary man looking serene to suddenly he's the Buddha. And his ears are longer, and there's a halo. He glows. I think it's almost impossible to hear this story the first time without this feeling that something happened. Something huge, something transformative. But now I picture it in my head, and what I see is he's sitting there, and he's sitting there, and then he opens his eyes a little more, and then he stands up. For him, something is different, something is new. There are no fireworks. Something shifted, and he knows something he didn't know before. There's a confidence, not just in himself, which he always had, right? He never lacked confidence, but a confidence in something else, a confidence in how things are. He stands up and he says, I, together with all beings, am awake. Not I did it, not I get it, but that I am not separate. If I am awake, everyone is awake. Everything is awake. And what this tradition does with that particular moment is it goes another step and it says, and they were always awake. And so in becoming the Buddha, Siddhartha woke up to awakeness. If you've ever had a lucid dream where you realize that the dream is a dream, you know that there are different ways to be asleep. You can be fully in a delusion, and you can also have one foot out. And in the same way, there are different ways of being awake. We can be awake in an ordinary way. We can also be awake to being awake. I don't know. But more and more I imagine it's something like that. That moment in this week that we're playing right now is the morning of December 8th. On the evening of December 7th, in Rohatsu Sesshin, people often sit all night to recreate this moment of total resolve. And the next morning, a bell rings and they just move back into the world, which is what he did. He stood up and he started walking. And I'll share this last part because I think it matters. The only time that Mara really got a grip on him, it wasn't while he was sitting beneath the tree. It was after. It was after he stood up. Mara showed up and he said, "Man, that was amazing. I didn't think you had it in you, but you did. That was incredible. No one could do what you did. No one has ever done what you just did. You should be so proud of yourself." But let's be honest, you are now so alone. There's not a person on earth who sees what you see. There's not a person on earth who gets what you just got. You proved that you can do it. You did what you needed to do. This is the moment where you let go of all of it. This is the moment where you go ahead and you transcend this body and you transcend this life. You transcend this suffering. Go ahead, be something else. Be free. And we're told that the Buddha heard this and he genuinely paused because everything Mara was saying to him felt true. He could not describe what he needed to describe. He didn't know how to teach what he needed to teach. But he resolved right there that he would try. Not that he would succeed, but that he would make the effort. And with that, Mara disappeared and never came back. The Buddha walked a while and he came upon those same people who had been training with him, those same people who shunned him, who said that he had betrayed them. They watched him come from a distance and they complained that he was coming. They rolled their eyes, but as he approached, something shifted. The way that he walked, the way that he carried himself was something they had not seen. And so we're told that by the time he arrived at where they were, they had all become his students. They just knew. All these people in the course of a week, and then in the course of a day, step into a different kind of faith, a different kind of seeing. All of these people move from a spirituality that is an act of control into an act of letting go. They all become open to something more. Not resolving something, but letting go of something to make space for something else. That's the moment of this week. That's the moment of every week. But this week we can embrace the opportunity. We can notice that this story resonates. We can notice that this story has resonated across the centuries, and we can find ourselves in it. We sit here in this way because he sat there in that way. It is a straight line. And though it is almost impossible for us to come to this in any way different from how he did, it is almost impossible for us not to come to this trying to control something, manage something, become something. We can be reminded this week that there's something else. There is a resolve that exists without the need to control the outcome. We can center ourselves in that, and we can discover what it has to offer. And that's where I'll stop.